I stand beneath your soul, your moon. The night would pass, my darling, soon. The wild dogs bark, but wait, stand still. They'll chase you down, but wouldn't kill. The gray seems grayer in your eyes, the bright shade of your bluest light. You say everything's just perfect.
Ponder me this question, if you will. Say you have an individual whose life has been filled with such extraordinary oddities that one cannot help but wonder if he is a genuine starseed. A being which does not originate from this planet. A being which somehow transferred its soul to a vessel here on Earth. This being did not die in order to achieve such a transformation, but rather a piece of it was technologically preserved and sent into a suitable host body. Back home, this individual has a family, has a significant other, waiting for their return. Ponder me this question, if you will. If a genuine starseed who goes on some sort of deployment to another planet has a significant other that awaits him back home, is that individual cheating when they go into earthly relationships? My name is Dakota Frandsen. I am the specialist of the strange. And this is such a question that has taunted my mind for quite some time. And though I have asked others their opinions on the matter, these same individuals have openly admitted that the circumstances surrounding my particular case are unusual. There was a point in history where I thought it was crazy. But after the events of the Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection in Orlando and the self-reflections I am forced to partake in while writing my new book, I felt that this is a topic that I should explore because many have asked me about it. And if you look far enough back, there's an interview on the Bald and Bonkers show with Helena Denon, where we ended the show on this very question, and she gave her input. But in order to understand my perspective on this matter, because there are people that have asked me, people that have said, because I'm on Earth, I'm here to have an earthly human experience, and I should partake in these types of things. To tell you the truth, I've always been a little gun shy when it comes to that. I've been in relationships, but a majority of them started because I was trying to help the damsel in distress. When it comes to my ET connections, that's where the story gets to be a bit more complicated. For those of you who don't know, the reason I discovered that I had a star family, for lack of a better term, was because of some rather tragic events that took place. And to my understanding, rules were bent in order to save my life. I was 12 years old when I first had the first clue came forward, where I was beyond a reasonable doubt that I had some sort of family somewhere that I was not aware of. I won't go into the details, but I tried to end my own life. There was a lot going on at the time, and it became heavy to bear. But as I went to do it, something happened. Something intervened. I remember seeing this bright blue light that I seen when he was transported to this void. Best way I could describe it was like I was deep underwater. The way the light seemed to bend and move around me. Suddenly this man appeared in front of me. I don't recall a vivid image. He looked blurry when he appeared. This man walks up to me. I could see that he had kind of long, brown, kind of dirty blonde hair. Wore what looked like a white robe. Again, his image was blurry. As he approached me, it became a little clearer, but I couldn't tell any major distinctive features to tell who it was. This man approached me and says, "Dakota, there's someone here to see you." He was concerned about my well-being. I could physically feel it coming off of this being, but there was no judgment. Like, he understood why my head was in the place it was, why I was doing what I was doing. He steps aside, then all of a sudden there's this little girl standing behind him. First thing I notice is that she looks just like me, and she is just bawling her eyes out. The little girl runs up to me, and choking on her tears, she's just saying, "Daddy, please don't do it." And I just remember seeing that sparkle in her eyes. The pit in my stomach that grew. I didn't know this girl. I didn't feel like I knew this girl. I feel like I knew her. I didn't know her. I've never seen this girl before, but I somehow knew. And I felt guilty for hurting her. The vision ends when she gives me a kiss on the cheek, and then I was back in my room where I was trying to harm myself. I was so shaken by what happened that I just went to bed and pretended like nothing happened. Because how am I supposed to be able to confront this? Ask for help? Because I felt like if I told everything, that would have ended up medicated. And even if I've got a head cold and absolutely needed to take medicine, or even just needed to pop a little something to help me get through the day because of allergies, I've always hated medicine. Just never liked dealing with it. Over the years, I never stopped thinking about this little girl. There were parts of me that would try to say, no, it's impossible. How the hell do I have a daughter? I mean, it would be 2 years before I even had my first kiss. How the hell do I have a daughter? If I had a daughter, somebody has some explaining to do. And even as I tried to research it, I would only ever come across stories of expecting parents who had visits from their kids while the mother was pregnant. Sometimes the mother didn't know at the time, but the mother was still already pregnant. So again, how is this possible? My daughter would visit me a few more times, not really given much details. I would try channeling sessions, try to get more, see how much I can get her to tell me. Okay, what's her favorite color? When is she going to be born? When is she going to come around? When is she going to be here? When is she going to come around? I don't know. Whenever I did these channeling sessions, she would tell me that she had a brother, she had a sister, and that she would come around. The question I asked directly is, when will she be born? Because I figured if this was my kid, this had to be some sort of weird time travel thing, right? That's the only thing that made sense. Because honestly, anytime I tried to write her off, it's like, no, that's no way, that's my daughter. A part of me felt guilty. There was almost like this voice, this woman's voice in my head, practically screaming at me, saying, how the fuck dare you try to deny that is your daughter? You don't realize how scared she was. That is your child. So I'm like, all right. If this is my kid, then all right. Next question. Who the hell's mom? Right? Because as far as I knew, it still took you needed 2 bakers in order to put that bun in the oven. Anytime I would try to ask about her mom, that's when it would start to fade. That's when this connection would start to break. She would tell me that she would be born around either 2024 or 2025. That was one of the things that stayed the most consistent. Now, being that this is my kid, and being as someone who went to look for his long lost siblings, there was a point in my time where I went to go look for long lost siblings. If there was a way I could try to sneak a message, I thought I could sneak a message across, I would have tried it. If this was my kid, there was a pretty good chance she would have tried to do the same. That was my logic. But nothing really significant would ever happen to really nail something down. There was even at one point where I was moving house and I got into a car accident. I was driving along, and all of it, I was driving a 2002 Chrysler. slamming on the brakes over and over. I was trying to get through this intersection, and it started doing it. I was freaking out. Next thing I know, there's a little girl sitting next to me. The little girl. Screaming her head off saying, "Daddy, look out." A pickup truck runs up, rushes through the intersection, speeding at 60 miles an hour, and hits me directly. Knocks me out hard to where the next time I ever. Now, mind you, I was alone in the car. There was no one else there. And we went out. If I started to come to, I started asking about the little girl. Where's the little girl? And everybody would just look at me like, there was no little girl there. It wasn't going to be until 2021 that a significant enough breakthrough would come forward that would allow me to finally piece this puzzle together. So, mind you, it's only been a couple of years. I know, soda's not the best, but I'm coming off of a cold, and the carbonation and the caffeine is clearing it up. So, yeah. 2021, I worked this international paranormal investigation being we started to look into, known publicly as the Hat Man. It's an apparition being, looks like a tall man, wears a wide brimmed hat, trench coat. Some people say it looks like he's wearing some sort of suit. The descriptions change, but it was something that was old. Descriptions changed over time, and a lot of people associated him with the idea that if he goes to show himself, something bad's about to happen. We started to look into this case, and to make a long story short, it was not happy. I was working on a separate little case before I got into this group, and I brought in some of my research notes that indicated that this being may have been, or at least the first one to ever appear, may have been the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. As in Cain from the story of Cain and Abel, the father of murder. That story comes from Breton mythology, talking about beings known as the Anku, which are essentially like Grim Reapers, servants of death itself. As for what Cain was doing, he was building an army. One of my colleagues even speculated that Cain may have been the genuine inspiration for one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Death. Just by me mentioning the story has often led to certain misfortunes to take place. And when these attacks went down, I was the one that had to break everybody free. One by one, people fell. One gal had to seek mental health help, mental health assistance. One gentleman who was on and off of cancer treatments. He had a pet shark that ended up dying because it looked like even this was all took place on a live stream, and I tried to preserve the video as best as I could. But it seems that not the major part of the attacks was preserved. One of his pet sharks all of a sudden turned belly up and had a big bruise on it, like somebody physically reached into the tank and just punched it. We had another guy who was coughing up blood, one who started to feel like she was being choked, and you can see her neck almost contracting like somebody had a big grip on it. The gentleman who was on and off of cancer treatments, he ended up getting possessed. But for some reason, whenever my name was mentioned, he would flinch. Full on power of Christ compels you level type of flinching. I was able to come on, cast it out. Last I checked, this gentleman's still doing okay. He's still active in the field. What became the most interesting was that the people who were affected the hardest, some of which who had to require some form of hospitalization, said that there was a secondary visitor that seemed like it was trying to help him. A little girl. Based on their descriptions of this little girl, it rang a little too familiar. I know this is kind of a long story, but I'm trying to establish the significance of why the question posed in this video weighs heavily on me. When they were to describe this little girl, it's rang a little too true. So I tried something on a whim. The DNA on my mother's side of the family, as far as appearance, tends to be fairly strong. I have an uncle, one of my mom's brothers, who I get mistaken for all the time. And he just so happens to have 3 kids. A boy and 2 fraternal twin girls. Pass off as my kids. I could literally take off dad and nobody would question it. And chances are those kids would probably run with it. I dug out a picture of my uncle's twin girls, and I showed these people. Said, by any chance, did this little girl you saw look like this? Look like these 2. They practically jumped out of their skin. Some of them, had they not been wearing glasses, probably would have had their eyeballs popped out. They go to ask me, Dakota, how the hell do you have that picture? That looks just like her. They look just like her. What's going on? So I tell them the story. The one gal who had to seek mental health help, she seemed to have the most consistent visitors. And she even messaged me one night. She knew the story. She knew what I called the little girl. She messaged me one night saying, Dakota, I think I just saw your daughter. Because my daughter had appearing so many times, I gave her a name. It felt wrong just to keep calling her the little girl for how much she was showing up. I called her Olivia. It's the first name that popped in my head. She said she liked the name. So, Olivia had apparently been showing herself to other people. And whenever she would show, the conditions of these people would practically improve overnight. With a couple weeks of recuperation, they were back in full business. However, this woman, she had the most visitations. It seemed like Kane was centering in on her. Like I said, she had a disposition towards violent events that I won't get into out of respect for her privacy. I'm only going to share the parts of the story that are necessary. But she also had a psychic disposition. She and I were very similar in a lot of ways. In fact, she was only a month older than me. She used to do a podcast, and one day, with these recordings, she sends me a tape of what sounds like a little girl's voice in the background crying out for mommy. Not that anything bad was happening, but it honestly just sounded like she was a little girl ready for bed. That's it. God damn. I'm okay, I promise. Back to the story. When she goes to tell me this, as well as how much detail she was able to go into about my daughter. My daughter, she looked like she was 6, but acted like she was more around the age of 3. And one of the first things she noticed right away is like, Dakota, she looks just like you. She has your height. I mean, she looks like you. In this recording of what legitimately sounded like my daughter's voice crying out for mommy, there was only one thing that I could think of in the moment. And that was, did I just find mom? Now, granted, a little disclaimer, there's been a few times where relationships started to get a little awkward because in my mind I couldn't help but try to decode whether or not the girl I was with at the time may have been the future mom. I didn't know. I had nothing to go on. So when this transpired, it was more than any other girl that I suspected. So I tried something. There's app on your smartphones that you can get. It's called Face App. It uses artificial intelligence to do like different hairstyles, change your looks, age progress you. And it gone viral on social media a couple years ago, and to where it even started getting banned by government agencies because they discovered that the developers were Russian. A lot of controversy surrounding it. But the AI was well trained. It was fairly accurate. It also had one of those what would your kid look like features, where you take like a celebrity and your picture and mash them together to see if you had a lucky one night stand and see what would happen if you ended up getting had a kid. I scored through social media in order to find a more direct to camera picture of this woman and ran it through this filter without telling her. I know it sounds creepy, but I had been searching for a little over a decade, and this was the only lead I had, so yes, I know it does sound kind of creepy that I did that. I should have elaborated better, but the situation happened. Let's move on. The only reason I'm reiterating its story because I'm trying to disclose everything about it to the best of my ability. I ran this girl's picture with mine through to see what would happen. What would our daughter look like? I even processed the photo a few more times in order to get closer to the age she was appearing. Say 3 years old, add a little bit of baby fat, a little rounder face. Then I sent the result back to her without telling her how I made the photo. Because how am I supposed to explain that? I know now that I should have elaborated, but I was so caught up into it, I got excited and jumped the gun. I should have elaborated that when this woman verified that this little girl was exactly the one she saw, I just told her I ran it through AI. I didn't tell her the exact steps. This was the closest I ever got. Here's the picture that resulted. I was partially convinced that this woman may have been Mom. I didn't even... Like I said, granted, in retrospect, I should have taken a pause and took my conclusion a couple steps back and said that at the very least, her mom looked like this woman. She had kind of very Nordic features. Fast forward through time again with another interview with Elena Denon, I showed her that photo, asking her more about, one's soul family, if someone may have a significant other. What she said was that if someone goes into a starseed or envoy program and they have already had a significant other in their other life upstairs, as she calls it, chances are the people the starseed finds themselves attracted to will remind them of their significant other, but they wouldn't realize it. This stuck with me. So the thought came forward about how I could potentially figure out what mom looks like. The idea I had was, what if I could essentially reverse engineer the photo I had of my daughter that was confirmed to be in a near exact likeness. What if I could essentially reverse engineer it, take out as many of my features as possible, and so that way it would leave it with just her mother. Now, how would I do that? I began to mentally re-examine all the women I've been with, celebrities I've had crushes on, and started trying to think, okay, what was common throughout all of these people? And I noticed that they all had a certain kind of facial structure. So with that face app, what I did is I took my daughter's photo and started to apply more, the different celebrity photos I could find to try to bring out more certain features and try to get rid of as much as me as possible. Eventually, it came to a point where I had to stop, and I froze. Because I did it. I managed to recreate mom. And I broke down. I broke down in tears. Once I saw this image, I started having more memory recalls of her. Of our life upstairs. And I realized that she was on the recovery crew when I was abducted at the age of 6 and helped bring me back home. Well, they dropped me off at my grandparents' house, but they knew I was somewhere safe. I'll go more into that in another episode. One of the eyewitnesses who spotted my daughter said that she had a feeling that someone was guiding her, teaching her how to use her abilities, help people, and stay in contact with me. But it's like, for lack of a better word, they were slightly out of frame, Say, like, how you can see me, there might be someone over here that you don't see. Something similar to that. When I managed to get that photo, I broke down because I started to realize how much they've been trying to help me all this time. I even re-examined some of my old contact sessions and found little audio recordings of them trying to tell me for almost a year before this where to look, but I just didn't catch it. And when I realized how much they've been there for me, it was a lot. Which was also something else Elena brought up. Was that if someone had a star family upstairs, they're technically not supposed to know about it because it could cause a mental breakdown. And that woman, spookily enough, was on the dot. But eventually, as I was trying to process all this new information that was coming to me at once, I made a promise that no matter what it takes, I was going to do whatever I could to see them again. And if that meant writing out some sort of grand mission that I didn't remember the full details of yet, then so be it. After all this took place and we established that yes, they're real, and us being in communication with one another wasn't going to cause any major harm, that's when the doorways started to open up. When people ask me how much I have contact with them, I recall at least once, like every other week. There's times when it slows down, but that's because they also have other jobs they need to do. February of last year, well, let me back up a little bit. March of 2021, I was taken to an infirmary on what looked like the surface of Mars. I was told that it wasn't, but when they tried to tell me where we actually were, there was an alarm and they had to send me back quick. But March 2021, I saw this woman and my daughter holding a baby boy. My daughter looks at me and says, "Daddy, come meet my new baby brother." Within a year, that little turd already started showing up like he was an adult. Same thing with my daughter. Some of her more recent visits, she's been showing up like she's in her 20s. February of last year, 14th, Valentine's Day, my wife actually surprised me with the date. Slow dancing amongst the stars. She even played a little song that she knew I would recognize. And when she said that it was a song that she heard while on Earth that reminded her of a promise we made to each other. And that song was, funnily enough, "Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now" by Starship. Ain't that... I thought that was fun. Honestly, I thought that was kind of funny. Alien, they like the songs by Starship. Honestly, it was a beautiful day. I remember seeing her in this skin-tight dress. I remember feeling her fingers between mine as we started to dance. And her eyes, my God. Her eyes were hypnotic. Then, as the mood started to catch us, I'll just keep it clean by saying that we had a very, very good Valentine's Day. Then, closer to November of last year, I found out that we had another daughter. And just in time for Sirius B to be cleared for those who are from that sector to go back home, we had a family reunion. They came to grab me to go off-world to go see my in-laws. I bring these stories up to illustrate that while the Federation is technically from about 300 years in the future of this planet, time is very complex when it comes to these ordeals. And it's not like, and by all accounts, it's not like my life up there stopped just because I'm down here. It all runs concurrently. While yes, I am in a stasis pod, there's a part of me that still takes on operations. So little did I realize, during the Hatman attacks, I was also being taken to help heal the people that were hurt the worst. And I could recall certain details about them that I would have to be intimately familiar with these people in order to know. And for those of you asking whether or not it means like physical intimacy or just known the person a long time, little of both. I'll just leave it at that. These checkups, these medical rescues, I started to remember them, took place. It felt more like I was there because I knew the individual we were trying to help personally, and I was just there as like kind of like a familiar face to help keep them calm. But as we got more into it, I started getting a little bit more hands-on to try to help them, to treat them to the best we were able to up there. And on occasional off circumstances, if there was something else that was wrong with them that we weren't necessarily allowed to deal with because it was an earthly-based affliction, I was able to reach out to this person and said, hey, you got something going on. You got something going on. You need to get to the hospital as soon as possible. And tell them as much as I could remember. And ironically, one such incident with a gentleman who was out of Texas, this very thing happened where we took him, we operated on him to help break some of the more otherworldly influences that were hurting him. I told him that he needed to get to the hospital because something was going on with it in his abdomen, look roughly around his appendix area. He just wrote it. I was like, oh, wow, you're like reading off my medical chart, man. 2 days later, he's in the hospital. And you want to know what he tells me? He tells me that the doctor that checked him out, he asked me if I had any relatives down in Texas, to which I said, not that I'm aware of. But knowing my family's history, I can never fully deny those types of things. I asked him why. He said the doctor that was down there, he looked like a shorter version of me. Like somebody who had my face superimposed on them. That was a little weird. I can go more into detail about that story, but I went into this long explanation because, like I said, just because I'm down here doesn't mean that I'm still active. By all accounts, it seems like I'm still very much an active asset. even with the chat with Tony Rodriguez, he came to a very similar conclusion that my mission's not through yet. And often there's people that kind of poke fun at me because I don't date so much. It's like, well, to put it simply, how the hell do I explain to someone who has no knowledge of this type of stuff that the reason why I'm disappearing at night is to hang out with a sexy alien woman and my 3 kids, who's technically my wife? Apparently we were married before I came on to start scene deployment, so that's how that works. That's how she explained it to me. I mean, after some of y'all may recall in the last FrandsenFiles episode, I mentioned that my son came by to visit me because he needed to talk to me. After that has transpired, I literally have a security camera set up where I know I've been flying out of to see if I can catch anything. Have I caught anything yet? No. Mostly dust orbs from the looks of it. And my cat's almost knocking the damn camera down. But I figured it's worth a shot. I've divulged so much of my life to try to figure this out. I honestly don't know how to deal with much else. Give me gods, ghosts, monsters, aliens. Yo, I'm all there. I'm the motherfucking specialist of the strange. I handle that better than I deal with humans. But in the same light, I also can't help but wonder. It's like I said, my kids, they've tried sneaking little hints to me, and I didn't catch on quite yet. And I feel like my son tried dropping a couple hints that maybe, just maybe, a version of their mom is on Earth as an envoy. Can you imagine how twisted that might be? Maybe I have a situation similar to Jean-Charles and Melanie Caress on the horizon. I don't know. Am I seeing someone right now? No. Is there someone who's got my eye? There's one. I'll admit it. But, like I said, I tend to get a bit gun shy because I don't have the best history when it comes to dating. Something that I know Chris knows about, but I'm about to kick his ass some days for trying to poke fun. I know he's just doing it just to poke fun and all that, but the situation's confusing, even on the best days. And now that I know about all this, and know how much they've done their best to be there, that's what honestly what makes it more difficult. I feel that when it comes to disclosure, my best course of action would be to document what it's like trying to piece all this stuff together. Quite frankly, this is the part that's rattled me the most. It's one, maybe once again, I'm just getting a little too excited and need to let things run their course. But in the same light, I don't want to miss out on an opportunity. I'll be honest. My life I've dedicated to try to break certain cycles of abuse. The reason why I broke down when I fully started to understand what was happening was because I felt like a part of me had abandoned someone who had had my back. Who I had felt like I abandoned my kids. As a friend of mine tried to reassure me. My kids have my personality. They're just as much of a smart ass as I am. So clearly I had some sort of influence. These things are tricky. And it's also why I keep trying to tell people. Don't assume you know everything at first. Because the more you dig into it, the more confusing it gets. And let's face it, I'm only 27 years old. This body may look older, but it's only 27. There's still a lot of learning I got left to do. I may be ahead of the game in some parts to where people like Elena, Dan Willis, Tony, they all admit that something's odd about Dakota. There's still other parts I need to work on. And who knows? Maybe my wife is on Earth. Maybe I already tracked her down. And if that's the case, seems like she's got just as much of a journey ahead of her as I do and me. But if that ends up being the case, there's only one thing I can hope for. I can say with confidence I'm well on the right track, but at the end of it all, I guess the only thing I can hope for is that I am the husband and father they deserve. I guess we'll see how everything unfolds. So let me know your thoughts. Yeah, it's confusing. And yeah, it's probably going to get chaotic. And I feel like that can be said for the rest of the world right now. But in the end, love and serving best who you truly are what matters. As confusing of a mess this may seem for me, I know who I am. I know what needs to be done. And I hope that somehow, whether it's through my books or through these videos, I managed to help someone on the way. See you next time.